welcome to Spell Slingers. This is a tutorial on how to play sorcery. We're going to cover the basics of, how to move your minions and your avatar, how to deal damage, how to win the game, and how to create mana so that you can play your spells and stuff like that. This is going to be pretty basic guide. I just want to give you enough so that you can start to sit down and play the game either on Tabletop Simulator or in paper if you have created some proxies about the game or whatever. But I recommend that when you do sit down to play after this video, you keep the rule book nearby because you're going to need to refer to it relatively often. But it's a good rule book and it will help you move through the game relatively quickly. Alright, so first thing to know is the golden rule. If the text of a card contradicts what is in this rulebook, the card text takes precedence, okay? So what the card says goes, all right? If you have any doubts, just do what you think the card is telling you to do. That's the golden rule. All right, let's get into this. Whoops, there we go. All right, how to win. I'm going to start here because I think it's really important and it might be a little confusing if you get there after a long game and you're not sure exactly how to win. So I think this is important. Let's start here first. Each player begins the game with 20 life. You lower your opponent's life by damaging their sights or their avatar. When an avatar reaches 0 life, they go to death's door. It's not a location, it's a state. It's something that is, I don't know how to describe it. It means you're at 0 life. You're at death's door. It's kind of unique to this game. Going to 0 life usually kills you, but in this game, you actually get 1 extra turn after going to 0 life. That means if my opponent puts me to 0 life, they have to, they don't have to, but they can't kill me until their next turn. You cannot die the same turn you go to death's door. It is written into the rules. It's not how the game allows, like player deaths to occur. This sounds a little weird at first, but it's really nice actually because it gives you a chance to make a comeback. And, playing at death's door can be really exciting. You're only 1 hit from death. Anything that hits you directly kills you, but it's possible to put your opponent to death's door and kill them first with the right strategy in lines of play. So that's pretty cool when it works out. Death's door is the closest a player can be to losing. Once at death's door, an avatar must be dealt damage directly to kill them. This means that dealing damage to their sight does not kill them on death's door. You can hit an enemy's sight that they control to lower their life. So when they're at 20 life all the way to 1 life, you can hit their sight instead of the avatar. Even if their avatar is on the other side of the map, you hit their sight and that damage is done directly to their life total. So that's what this means here. But when they're on death's door, hitting a sight does not kill them. You must do damage directly to the avatar to kill them at death's door. Direct damage is attacking the avatar with another avatar or a minion or any kind of magic damage that touches the avatar directly, like a fireball or a lightning strike, something like that. Okay? So let's talk about how to play a sight. It's the first thing you do in a game, really. After you've drawn your hand and you've chosen who goes first, the first thing you do is play a sight. So you may tap an avatar. Tapping means rotate it 90 degrees so that it lays horizontally. Anything out of your spellbook or your avatar typically sits at the table vertically, as you see here. It's in the portrait mode, it's vertical. But tapping is a way to establish that you have paid a cost for an action. And tapping means you rotate it 90 degrees. So now it lays horizontally. So you tap your avatar to play a sight adjacent to a sight that you control. This should say you control. So if I have a sight underneath me, I can tap my avatar to play a sight adjacent to a sight I control. It doesn't have to be near my avatar. It just has to be adjacent to one of my sights in play. And adjacent in sorcery means above, below, left, or right. not diagonal. So you can't play a land diagonal to another one of your lands. Lands and sites are like the same thing. Land is a terminology from another game that makes sense in this one. Sorry if I interchange those, but when I say land, I do mean site. And when I say creature, I also mean minion. So sorry if that's confusing. Old habits die hard. At the beginning of the game, you'll actually be sitting in an empty tile in the middle of the board on your side of the board, directly opposite from your opponent. So there won't be a site beneath you at the very beginning of the game, which means you will just tap your avatar to play a site. That site must go directly underneath you the first turn. Then every other turn from that, you play it the way I've just described, adjacently to other sites you've already put into play. Let's talk about how to move, because this is the next thing you'll probably be likely to do. I have some graph here, some images, but to move either a minion or avatar, you must first tap it. Again, kind of coming back to tapping being a cost for an action. This is the same for minions and avatars, so you don't need to learn it twice. Once you've tapped it, you can move it to an adjacent tile. Again, not a diagonal tile. Airborne creatures may move diagonally though, so they get a little extra movement, like some versatility in their movement, which is good to know should you be playing the wind deck or any airborne creatures. So if you look at the graph here, it says, okay, you've got a minion here and he's on your site, and then your opponent's site is directly in front of you. You could tell it's your opponent's site because it's on the other like half of a square. So yours falls on this half of the square, and you play it this way as an etiquette so that it's easy to tell whose side is whose. Your opponent does the same relative to their half of their squares. So these are two different squares, right? Because you see the line here. And your opponent plays theirs as close to them as possible while you play yours as close as you to possible. It just makes keeping up with the board state much easier. Their lands or sites are also upside down relative to you, so that's another way to tell. Anyway, you tap your minion, so as shown here, rotate it 90 degrees, and then you move it. So I'm moving straight forward because that's adjacent to me. And now I'm on their tile or their site. So that's how it works. Tap it, rotate it 90 degrees, and then move it. Get in the habit of tapping it first before moving, and you won't accidentally misplay. So that's a good thing to get in the habit of early. Okay. You may combine an attack with your movement on either the site or any minion of your choosing on the site or an avatar on the site. So let's say there was a minion and player's avatar on this site. You could also attack when you get here. You just have to make it one action, basically. You move here, and as soon as you do, you declare, I am attacking. You can't play spells before, like in between moving and before attacking. It has to be done when you move, okay? And if there's two minions here, you can choose, okay, which minion am I attacking? And you declare it. You say, I'm attacking this one, not this one. So when you attack that way, if they do have other minions there, they may choose to tap a minion to block. So if all their minions are tapped, they can't even block, which is nice to know. Because again, tapping is the payment to do the action to block, as well as move and attack. You can just combine move and attack together to make it one action, which helps keep the game flowing and keeps the pace of the game a little bit faster than it would be if you had to tap to move and tap to attack separately. But don't worry about that because you can in fact combine the movements to move and attack, which is great. And if there was an avatar here, you could choose to attack the avatar. If there's nothing here, you can just attack the site to deal damage to their life total like we've talked about. Okay. Let's talk about the steps of a turn. This is one of the first things I would recommend keeping open on either a phone or actually print it. Just have this next to you when you play in the first couple of games that you play, because this is when you can do what you can do in a turn. So it's very important to know. So if you look here, this is directly from the official rulebook. We have the start phase, which is all of these three things. So the start phase, the main phase, and the end phase. There's kind of three large sections of a turn, and they each have little subsections denoted here by the decimal points. So the first thing you do in a turn is untap. It's the untap step. You untap your avatar, minions, and relics. The first turn of the game, you're not going to have anything to untap, so you move through this phase without really doing anything. So that might seem a little awkward at first, but almost every turn after that, you will have stuff to untap. And those will be your avatar, the minions that have been tapped, and sometimes relics. After that, you do the draw step. This is where you choose to draw one card from either your atlas or spellbook. The first player in a game does not draw on their first turn. So if you're going first, you skip this step, but you only skip it on your first turn. Every turn after that, you will draw like normal. After you've chosen which deck you're going to draw from and you've drawn one card from that deck, you go to the start step. This is where effects that say at the start of turn happen. Okay? Some cards do something at the start of your turn, and that happens right here. So it's important to know you draw a card and untap before those effects happen, which can be relevant. You know, sometimes you get extra information from the card you've drawn, and maybe that changes what you do with that effect that happens at the start of your turn. So don't forget to untap and draw before you do that effect. And then after that, you're in the main phase. The main phase has a lot of things you can do, and you could do them in any order. So you don't have to worry about which ones you do first here, but good strategic players will do things in certain orders to get the most value out of that main phase. So you may, in any order, cast spells, which is playing any card from your spell book that you've put in your hand. Activate abilities. Some cards have abilities you can activate. Usually it requires tapping or something, but you can do that during your main phase. Interact with relics, so you can pick up relics during your main phase. Move with the minion, attack with the minion, move with an avatar, or attack with your avatar. Those are the things you can do in your main phase in any order. All right, after you have chosen to end your main phase, so you kind of choose when you end your main phase. Sometimes there will be literally nothing else you can do, and you're forced to move to the end phase. But sometimes you have actions you could do but are choosing not to do at this moment for strategic reasons, and that is when you go to the end phase. Effects that say at the end of turn happen here. So just like the start of turn effects, some cards do things at the end of turn, and that happens here. Then there's the rest step. Any damage dealt to minions this turn heals here. So if you hit a minion for 1, but it has 2 power, so it doesn't die, that 1 damage goes away at this point in the end phase. And then until end of turn, abilities end and the turn passes. Some cards like affect you, your board, or whatever. They affect something until the end of turn. So that means it happens like it's doing the thing the whole turn until this moment, which is the last possible moment in the turn. So those effects kind of dissolve or disappear here. And then the turn passes. So now it goes to your opponent, and then they do the same thing, and then it goes back to you. So it's a constant back and forth. Now let's talk about mana and threshold. So the cards in your spell book typically have a mana cost. That is the gray number here. That's often referred to as the mana value, the mana cost, the mana. Just it's how much mana you need to actually pay for the spell, because spells are not always free. They usually cost something. And this one I have here is the Rollicky Dragonets. And it costs 5 mana, and it requires 2 fire thresholds. Now, I know that because there are 2 red triangles, which is the fire element sign. Okay, so I know it requires 2 fire threshold, but it costs 5 mana. If you have 5 fire sites in play, and at least 2 of them have the fire symbol, as denoted here, so this is a site, it's got the fire symbol here as I'm pointing to with the arrow, so I know that this site gives me 1 fire threshold. Then you could play the Dragonets on your turn. So you need 5 lands, and 2 of them need the fire symbol, and you could play the Dragonets. The mana is spent, meaning if you have 6 lands and you play the Dragonets, only 1 still has mana for this turn. Okay? You get that mana back at the start of every turn, but It is, you get that mana at your start of your turn. So if you have 6 lands in play at the start of your turn, you have 6 mana available to you that turn, and mana is spent. So I could cast 2 3 mana spells, I could cast 1 6 mana spell, or I could cast 6 1 mana spells. Okay? In this case, we're casting a 5 mana spell, so we would have 1 mana left over if we had 6 lands. And that is, again, the gray number. That's the mana. You don't count the extra triangles as mana. Those are threshold. The threshold is not spent, meaning the card, it only checks to see if you have at least 2 fire sites. Threshold is not spent. It is not like mana. It is just a stipulation. If I'm playing nothing but water sites, then I cannot play the Rollicking Dragonettes, even if I have 5 mana, because I need the 2 fire threshold. It's not spent, it's just checking. Do you have 2 fire sites? Yes? Okay, you can play the Dragonettes. No? Okay, you cannot. All right? That's something that confuses a lot of people. I hope I explained it well here, and hopefully you can explain it well to your friends as well. Okay, now let's talk about attacking. In combat, avatars and minions deal damage equal to their power, which is the number with the shield and swords. So 5 here, 3 here. This is upside down, but still 3. Damage dealt to a minion persists. Oh, if a minion is dealt damage equal to or higher than its power, it dies. Damage dealt to a minion persists within a turn, but is reset at the end of the turn. And damage dealt to avatars, however, persists throughout the game, because that's your life total. A player may tap their avatar or minion to perform an attack against an undefended site controlled by their opponent. So if there was no minion here, the Sea Serpent could attack the land instead, the site instead. But because there is a minion here, if I move to attack on this tile, I have to swing at one of the minions here because it is defended. It is only undefended when there is no minions or avatars on the site. Or if there's no other legal target to attack, which sometimes comes up. So let's show an example. All right, here I have a board state. I have a Sea Serpent and the Rimland Nomads here on the other tile. This is actually a bad example because the Sea Serpent can't move into here because of waterbound, but whatever, it still works. So I'm going to tap and move here, right? Just like we talked about with moving. And I'm declaring an attack against the Nomads. So I have a 5 power Serpent. It's going to deal 5 damage to a 3 power Nomads, which means the Nomads will die. So that gets placed in the discard. Okay, that's how that would work in that situation. Now let's go back to the slideshow and talk about blocking. At any point during a player's main phase, a player may tap a minion or avatar they control to block an attack against an avatar or minion on an adjacent site. If the blocker is not on the same site as the attacked avatar or minion, it first moves to the site and then blocks, so it must be untapped to do any of this, blocking or moving. The avatar or minion that was initially attacked does not deal damage or does not take damage. This is worded incorrectly. The avatar or minion that was initially attacked, oh yeah, it does not deal damage or take damage, because the way it works is if I attack this nomad and this bull comes in to block, then I'm not hitting the nomad and the nomad's not hitting me. Now I'm in combat with the bull because he's gotten in front of me. Okay? A player may tap multiple minions and an avatar to block. If a minion or avatar gets blocked by one or more minions, then the controller of the attacking minion chooses the order in which damage is dealt to the blockers. Minions can block at any time after they are summoned. Summoning sickness does not apply. Attacks against a site cannot be blocked unless otherwise stated. So if I'm attacking a site and there's nothing here, then it doesn't matter that these guys are adjacent. They can't come in to block because it's an undefended site. But when there's a minion here, and I move in to attack the minion, then he can come in, tap, right, to move, and come in and block. And so now the combat's between these two, protecting the nomads. Okay? So that's how blocking works. And again, you can move adjacently to block. You just must be untapped. A blocked creature could not move to attack because it must tap to block. Okay? And blocking works just like attacking, where you could combine it with a movement action to do it. And blocking lets you move even when you're not on your turn, because the only time you can block is on your opponent's turn. But if this guy is untapped, then he can block by moving in and blocking at the same time. So these two hit each other instead. Okay. Anything else I want to talk about real quick? Yeah, let's talk about Summoning Sickness, because we haven't talked about that yet. So if I play this Sea Serpent this turn, right, I take it from my hand and I play it this turn, it has what we call Summoning Sickness. It cannot tap to move or tap to attack or tap really to do anything this turn. But should I pass the turn, it is now available to block. Summoning Sickness doesn't affect blocking. It only affects like things you can do on your own turn with the creature you've just played. So if I was to move in and there was another creature here, I could block. Okay, so that's good to know. Other than that, that's pretty much it. I mean, there are other things to know, like haste means you can attack when it comes into play. So Summoning Sickness doesn't affect haste creatures, which is nice to know. Iron Skin and Movement +1, I'll let you guys figure that one out on your own. Dig into the rules a little bit, bite your teeth into that, and figure that one out. Okay, so we've talked about what cards do, how you play cards, what the board kind of setup looks like, and most of the basics that you need to actually sit down and begin to play. So let's walk through a couple examples. I'm going to put a couple cards back here that we're pretending are in my hand. Okay, so these cards are in my hand. I have a 1 mana minion, a 2 mana minion, and a 1 mana magic. And then across from the table from me, I have a ghost player who has some minions from 1 mana to 5 mana. And so we are going to pretend to play a few rounds against this ghost player here. So I'm going to draw 3 to put 3 of those lands into my hand, just like I would if I was starting the game, when you draw 3 from the Atlas and 3 from the spellbook. If you're the first player in the game, then when you go to your draw step, that first step of the turn, like we talked about after untapping, you don't draw if you're the first player. Just for that first turn though, every turn after that you will draw like normal. It's just a way to balance because the first player has an advantage by going first. Alright, so here we are. I'm going to pretend that I'm the first player. So the first thing I'm going to do is play a site. So if you read the Avatar Fire here, it says tap to play or draw a site. So tapping is the cost to do the thing on the other side of the arrow. It also has another ability that is a Avatar Fire specific ability. We're not going to worry about that though. Every avatar has the ability to tap to play or draw a site. So turn 1, you definitely want to put some mana on the board. So you're going to tap, you're going to put a site down. Just right here. And you keep the avatar on top of it. So you might need to grab it if you're playing a tabletop. If you're playing in person, you just move it out of the way, play your site, and then move it back. So now I've got this arid desert. So I have 1 mana available to me because I have 1 land. I also have 1 fire threshold. If you see the kind of orangish red triangle on the right side of the text box, that shows me that it gives me 1 fire threshold, which is something we've already gone over, so we know about that. So what can I play with 1 mana, 1 fire threshold? Well, I could play my Will of the Wisp. It costs 1 mana and then 1 fire threshold, which I have. So I'm going to use my 1 mana that I have this turn that I've created with the desert. Just because the desert's here, I have access to that mana every turn. And I'm going to use it to play the Will of the Wisp. Now, usually you must play your minions on sites you control. But the Will of the Wisp has Void Walk, which means I could play it anywhere in the void. So anywhere that there's not already a site is considered the void. All of this is void right now. And Will of the Wisp has Void Walk, so I could play it there. I'm not going to go over all the mechanics and abilities. I highly, highly recommend after watching this video and sitting down to play, you have the rule book with you. It's not super big. You should be able to use it to refer to it to see, okay, what does Airborne do? What does Void Walk do? And you'll get a quick answer from the rule book that will help you progress through the game. This video is just to get you sitting at the table ready to put cards on it. A more comprehensive guide may come later. Okay, so now I've spent my 1 mana, I've played my only land for turn, my avatar's tapped, so I can't move it, and there's no sites around me, so I have nowhere to move it to anyway. So I'm going to pass the turn to the Avatar of Water. The Avatar of Water is the second player, so they're going to choose to draw from this Atlas or the Spellbook. I haven't put any lands in their hands, so let's put 3 over here. And we're just pretending that they have 3 in their hand. We know that they have 5, even though they're only supposed to start with 3. I guess it's fine, actually. Let's put these back. So this is how they would start. This is what their hand may look like at the beginning of the game. They go to their turn. They decide, okay, I don't need lands yet because I already have 3 in my hand. So I'm going to draw from the spell book. And look at that. They drew a 1 mana spell, so that's perfect. They're going to tap just like we did. They're going to play a Spring River, which is their land for turn. And now they have 1 mana and 1 water threshold. So they can also play the Porcupine Pufferfish, which they will play. They can actually play this underneath their land because of Submerge. We won't really go into that right now, though. Just know that they were able to play a 1 mana spell that has 1 water threshold because they have 1 land that produces the water threshold. I suppose it's wise to talk about the Genesis ability. Genesis means when this card comes into play, like when it hits the board, it does a thing. This one looks at the top spellbook card, and then you may put it at the bottom. So when this comes into play, before I've even played the creature, I look at the top card of my spellbook, and I can either put it to the bottom or the top. I want to see that next turn, so I'll put it to the top. And then I would play my Porcupine Pufferfish. So that's what Genesis does. Again, refer to the rules for this kind of stuff. I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds about it here. So then they have nothing else they can do because the rest of their spells are way more mana than they currently have. So they'll pass to me. I will untap now because that's the first step of a turn. And if my creature was untapped before, I would untap it as well and any minions. Or any relics and minions. This is a minion. So then I'm going to draw from the spellbook. So I see a 5 mana spell, so I'm not going to be playing that for a while. I'm going to tap to play the Red Desert, which has its own Genesis effect, but this one doesn't work until they are close enough to me with either minions or sites for me to hit it. So that doesn't do anything for now, but what I can do is use the 2 lands that I have to create 2 mana. I just have this 2 mana on my turn because I have 2 lands. I also have 2 Fire Threshold because they're both fire sites, indicated by the elemental icon, the little triangle. So I could play this Rattlesnakes because it costs 2 mana and requires 2 Fire Threshold. So that's ready to go. Awesome. That's all I'm going to do this turn. I don't want to use this Will of the Wisp yet because if I attack into them, they can block it with their avatar, which has 1 power, just like the Wisp, so the Wisp will die, or they could bring the Porcupine up out of the water to also block and also kill my Wisp. And I don't want to lose the Wisp yet, so I pass to them. They untap. They choose to draw. They're going to draw from the spellbook because, sorry, I live in an apartment. Sometimes weird noises happen in the background. They draw from the spellbook, which is a 2 mana spell. So they're going to tap their avatar to play a land. And remember, they could play it adjacent to any lands they control. So that means here, here, or here. I could play this land at any one of these 3 spots right now, but I'm going to play it here. And then I have 2 lands. They both produce 1 mana and 1 water threshold. So I could play my Unland Eel. It's 2 mana and it only requires 1 water threshold, so I have enough to cast it. So I'm going to play it there. And then I'm going to pass my turn. Once I've passed, my Avatar Fire opponent untaps, draws a spell. They tap to play a land here because it's adjacent to this one. And now I can actually use this Genesis ability to deal 1 damage to a nearby minion or site. So that's what I'm going to do. Nearby means diagonal as well as adjacent. And adjacent and nearby both count the tile they're on as well as their stipulated nearby stuff. So adjacent means everything above, below, left, or right, and the same site it's referring to it. So an adjacent ability could hit above, below, left, or right, or here as well. A nearby ability is the same thing, but it also counts the diagonals. So nearby is just more flexible. This does say nearby, so I'm going to use the remote desert to deal 1 damage to this nearby site right here. So that will take my opponent down to 19. It's upside down, but it's 19. Then I have 3 mana, so I could cast a spin attack. An ally deals damage equal to its power around to enemies around it. This is a magic, so we'll talk about magics a little bit here. I am going to play it because I have 3 mana and it only needs 1 fire threshold, so I have that easily. I'm going to spin attack. I'm going to use the spin attack on my rattlesnakes. So my rattlesnakes is going to deal damage equal to its power to enemies around it, which means it's going to hit this unland eel with the spin attack. This is different from your typical attack. So what it does is just deal damage equal to its power to enemies around it. Around also means nearby. Those are interchangeable. So it would hit everything diagonally, but only my enemies, and it won't touch anything in the void, so it couldn't hit my guy. And if they had a guy in the void here, it wouldn't hit it either. But it does hit the eel. Now it only does 1 damage to the eel because my rattlesnakes is only 1 power. My cat is crawling under my microphone right now, sorry. Goodness gracious. So it only does 1 damage to the unland eel, but the rattlesnakes has lethal, which means any damage it deals to a minion kills the minion. So it kills the unland eel. You can look up lethal in the rules, and I definitely encourage you to do that for burrowing as well on your own time. I think that's the best way to learn. Okay, so that's cool. It didn't tap my creature to attack, or it didn't tap my minion to use the spell. So I can also now move my minion forward by tapping it and moving it, and I can attack this land in the process because I combine the attack with the movement. So it's all kind of one thing. And they have no blockers here, so they have to take 1. I can also do that with my Will of the Wisp, same deal. So I'm going to also attack it for another 1, putting them to 17. Will of the Wisp says after combat, this wisp may teleport to a nearby void location, which means after it attacks, and if like there's a blocker that doesn't immediately kill it, then combat kind of happens, the damage goes through, and now it teleports to a nearby void location, which means anywhere here or here, because it's nearby, not adjacent, and it says void location, so anywhere there's not a site. Pretty sweet. Alright, let's pass the turn back. They're going to untap. They're going to draw a spell. And then they have a land in hand. They're going to play Leviathan Island. Puts them to 3 mana. They're going to play a Deep Sea Mermaids here. Then they're going to pass to me. I'm going to untap. I'm going to draw a land this time because I don't have any lands to play, so I want a land now. And Cornerstone says it may be played on a corner void. So I can actually play it here, even though it's not adjacent to my lands, because remember the golden rule, what the card says goes, and it says it could be played on a corner void. So that's what I'm doing. This was a corner with no sites, so it's a corner void. And then I'm going to attack this land with both my minions again. This does happen 1 at a time, so if the rattlesnake hits it for 1, then the Will of the Wisp moves in and hits it for 1, and then teleports back. Just like that. And I'll pass to them. So now I'll show you how attacking a minion works. So they're going to untap. They're going to draw an Atlas because they would like another land. They're going to play the Atlas here. And because they played it under my or on my Will of the Wisp area, the Will of the Wisp is now on the site. So it's no longer in the void, which means the void walk stuff no longer applies until I move it back into the void. Not super relevant right now, but good to know you can play a land underneath a Voidwalk creature as long as it's still adjacent to one of your lands, and you bring them out of the void into the site. Okay, so now I can use this deep sea mermaid to move here and attack their rattlesnakes. So I hit the rattlesnakes for 2 because it's a 2 power thing, and the rattlesnakes only has 1 power, so it dies. But because the rattlesnake has lethal, it will also kill the mermaid. Bummer. Then I'm going to pass back to my opponent. And this is kind of the flow that the game, takes. So on this turn, I'll show you what another magic may look like. So I'm going to play a fire bolts. It says your spellcaster fires 3 bolts, each traveling in any cardinal direction, which means up, above, or yeah, below, above, left, and right. Those are cardinal directions. So again, not diagonal. Cardinal is essentially adjacent. They use cardinal direction instead of adjacent because these things travel. They go more than 1 square at a time. When they hit an enemy, they each deal 1 splash damage. So my avatar, or every avatar actually, is a spellcaster by default. Some creatures have the spellcaster ability in their text box, which would also, of course, make them a spellcaster. So I'm going to play for 1 mana the fire bolts. When you play a magic, unless it says so, you do not have to tap your spellcaster. Tapping is only required to use the abilities on the avatar, or to move, or to attack, or to block. Okay, so good to know. I'm going to shoot the firebolts in this cardinal direction, straight forward or up, if you will. They travel, and I'm going to fire all 3 in the same direction. They're going to hit the Avatar of Water, dealing 3 damage to everything above this site. So that hits the Avatar for 3, 1, 2, 3, but it does not hit the pufferfish because it's below this site. Splash damage deals damage to everything above the site when it hits an enemy or minion. So if it had hit a minion here, it would have only done the splash damage to this site, but it keeps traveling till it hits an enemy, minion, or avatar, so it does hit her, and it does 3 damage to everything above this site. So if there were 100 1-power creatures here, they would all take 3 damage because that's how splash works, which means I would kill all of them. So it's pretty sweet. So that's how splash damage works, and that's how you would cast a spell or a magic. That's how you cast a magic. Something to know about the magics is as soon as you cast it, it's going to your discard pile. Magics don't stick around like creatures or minions do. Okay, there's definitely more to know, but I think a lot of it you can just refer to the rules to figure out. I highly recommend, again, keeping the rulebook open when you play. It's incredibly useful. It's pretty well written. Sometimes you'll have a question and it's not in the rulebook. That's because it's still a work in progress. The game doesn't technically launch until September 2022, so keep that in mind. It will be slowly more fleshed out and built upon, so that most of your questions hopefully will be answered by September. And if you can't figure it out, just come up with a compromise with your opponent and play it that way until we find out otherwise. That's kind of part of the fun here, is that we're in on the ground floor, so sometimes we'll see things no one else has seen before, or at least no one else has brought to the public eye. That's it for now, guys. I hope this helped. I'm going to do a more comprehensive guide eventually. I'll get around to that. That one's going to be a lot longer, probably a lot wordier, maybe a bit longer winded, but that's just the way it's going to have to be for a comprehensive guide. So look forward to that eventually. And until then, keep on slinging spells.